Hi, everybody. Good evening. And it has been a whirlwind of a day. I'm Tony E. at Show IP Interface Brief. And it's about 11 p.m. I did a long lab today, longer than I expected. I did 7.5 hours. And I did a live stream on YouTube for 7.5 hours. Here's the video here. I'll put a link to it in this. In fact, I'll grab a shareable link. Throw that sucker on Notepad. There we go. And I'll put that in the video. But here it is, 7.5 hours. So I was labbing for about 7.5 hours straight. It's a long time. It was intense. So I wanted to do a full live stream, and I wanted to do a full lab instead of doing the little, I don't know what I should call them, micro labs. Micro labs are when you choose a particular technology and you just lab it out inside and out and upside and downside and to the left and to the right, and you lab it in every direction you can. And that's what I did with DMVPN on my week 1 of my 100 days of labbing. And that's what I've been doing over the past few days, finishing up my second week, which is OSPF and OSPF authentication specifically, because there are so many different ways to configure it. I've always gotten them sort of mixed up, and it's hard to keep them straight. So with that said, I knew I wasn't going to be able to really make any progress unless I did a full lab. You know, again, the mantra I've been sticking by is labbing is not supposed to showcase your strengths. It's supposed to expose your weakness. And if we just keep doing micro labs, I'm not really stitching all of these things together, and that's really where the understanding comes from. So I decided to do a full lab for today, and I really had a lot of fun. Oh my God, this was an amazing experience. I absolutely love labbing. I love just the sitting down and troubleshooting and trying to ingest a completely new topology you've never seen before, and try to configure things with the tools that you know how to work with to meet business requirements, or really they're just tasks, but it's amazing, and you just get into a groove, man, and it's awesome. It's really a good feeling. So I did that for 7.5 hours. Truth be told, about the first hour and a half, I actually had trouble getting the lab started. And I was troubleshooting for a little bit. I stopped the VM. I started the VM. I did a whole bunch of stuff, and I couldn't get the original lab topology to start. So I ended up falling back to a different lab topology. It's actually the same topology. It just has different startup configs. And zeroing out those startup configs and then pasting in one at a time the startup configs for this lab. And so that took some time. I thought I was prepared for it last night. I thought I prepared enough for it last night, and I did not. So it was a little rough start. But once I got into a groove, man, I finished up at, I think, just after 5 p.m., and wow, that was an amazing feeling. That was an amazing feeling. Wow. It sucks that, if you do too many of these in a row, you kind of get burned out. That was the recommendation from some people who are labbing along with me and supporting each other in our CCIE journey. Take a break and don't burn out. And I'm feeling that pain because it was kind of an adrenaline rush being able to walk away from the lab and just knowing, like, I'm finished. However the cards fall, I'm finished. I'm done. I'm at the end. It was a good feeling to be done, and so I'm going to take tomorrow is supposed to be my cheat day, so tomorrow will be my cheat day. I will not lab tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday. I've kind of been on this pattern. Let's see if I can bring up my spreadsheet, which is somewhere around here. This is my spreadsheet where I keep track of my hours spent, the days that I lab, and so here's my tracker up here in the upper right. So here we are. Today is day 12, and I did 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours of labbing. Although the first hour heavy was troubleshooting the lab, I'm considering it lab time. And the reason is because I kind of shorted myself the previous 2 days. I didn't put my time in on day 10 and 11. I wasn't keeping track. So I gave myself about an hour and a half each. I know I did more than that, but I'm not really sure. So I don't want to just fake it and give myself inflated numbers. I'd rather give myself deflated numbers. So this is where I spent. So look, guys, here in 12 days, 12 days. Now, this is actually 13 calendar days, right? Because, see, I skipped this one. I skipped last Sunday as my cheat day. In 12 days of labbing, I've done 37 hours. I think that's pretty good. All of the people whose blogs I've read about studying for the CCIE and preparing for the CCIE and lab studies and how to pace yourself and topics to cover and planning and this, that, there's a ton of information and advice out there, you know. Kind of what I said the other day is it's mostly a solo journey, which is why there's so many blogs dedicated to it, because, you know, once someone's completed it or put the effort in, you know, they want to share that experience so others can gain from it. And I'm someone who's gaining from it. I'm learning from other people's experiences. One of the themes that rings throughout all of the blogs is you're not going to make it doing like a couple hours a week. Not unless your full-time job is heavy command line troubleshooting and configuration. If you're doing that for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day, and you only put in a couple of hours labbing, labbing outside of work at home, touching on topics you don't get at work, that may be acceptable. But if you don't deal with these technologies and the wide breadth of all of these technologies every day, you have to grind it out. And so I feel like I'm on a good pace getting these hours. So on 4th of July, I had 6 hours, and then today I did 7.5 hours. So those were 2 huge days. I mean, together that's 13.5 hours. So that would bring my standings down to 24 hours in 12 days. That's about 2 hours a day on average if I took out those 2 days. Because those are my heavy hitters. So I wanted to share my results of the lab. Here's my results. They are hand graded. My lab, I did I have an INE All Access Pass. And they have the workbooks on there. And at the bottom of all of the workbooks, they have a couple of sections. Let's see if... let me see if... Okay. At the bottom on their website, they have their labs here. The foundation labs, advanced foundations, advanced troubleshooting, full-scale labs, and then under that is mock labs, which sort of stitches together troubleshooting and configuration at the same time. So what I did today was the CCIE Route and Switch V5 Foundation Lab 1, and it was a lot of fun. So I'm hoping next Saturday, I don't know if I'll be able to do it next Saturday because I'm looking at the family calendar and I have an event next Saturday. I'm going to talk with my wife, figure out what time that is, and I'll keep everyone posted on Twitter on whether or not I'm doing a full stream on next Saturday. And worst comes to worst, maybe I'll stream in the morning and just get through half of the lab. That's still doing something. That's making progress. I'm not going to ditch the day, but I don't know if I'll complete the lab like I did today, which was a long freaking day. And I'm hoping just to kind of work my way through this. Lab 1 was today, Lab 2, Lab 3, jump over to troubleshooting, then do the full-scale labs, and then maybe the mock labs. This is not going to be every Saturday in a row. I'd like it to be, but I'm realistic. There's so much going on the weekends. I'm lucky to have today, the time that I spent today, because my family's out of town. And I'm not with them, so I can make progress on these labs. So I'm sacrificing my time and my family's sacrificing me so I can work on these labs. I wanted to make the most of my time today. I likely won't have this amount of time to do it every Saturday, so we'll try to work it into the schedule, but here is my plan for live streams and weekends. All right, so I'm using the INE CCIE Routing and Switching V5 workbook, Advanced Technologies workbook. At the bottom are the foundation labs, and so there is no way to grade it. There is no script. You can't run. It's just honor system. They give you the solutions. And so I took a look at the solutions on one side of the screen and my configs on the other for all of the devices. And as we went through each of the topics, troubleshooting was number one. There was one fault that needed to be resolved. And actually, this was kind of funny. I put a little reminder to mention it, that the fault that is stated here in the solution was not actually the fault that I had. Or at least I don't remember. I seem to remember that not being a fault, specifically what the solution said, because I went and checked the configs and it's already configured correctly. And I don't remember actually configuring that interface. But we did find a number of other faults throughout the lab, which were inconsistencies between the lab tasks, the configuration on the router, and the topology. So I'm kind of using like all these like different sources here. Like I have an old PDF of the Advanced Technologies workbook that I'm working from, and that's why I print this out. The topology comes straight from the INE website, so that's the topology there, and then the solutions comes from their website. So because it's a couple of different sources, I'm having a little bit of, like, maybe this document is on revision 1, the topology is on revision 2, and the answers are in revision 3. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but there are some differences there. So I marked troubleshooting as good because I have fixed the problem, even if there wasn't one to begin with. Next was Ether channel. I got the Ether channel. My configs were the same, even though my interfaces are different. In the solution, they use fast Ethernet interfaces, and in the lab, I use gigabit. So with those subtle differences, I marked it as correct. Now, I will say this. I'm a little bit easy on myself here because I'm allowing some subtle differences between the solution and what I actually put in. In my experience with like the Cisco 360 or the Cisco expert level labs that they offer online, which are really great labs, and I'll get to them at the end of my journey, they're looking for very specific things, and there is no like arguing the answer. It's either right or it's wrong. So here I'm giving myself a little leeway in the fact that the interfaces are a little different, so I'm trying to compensate for that. The next subject was trunking. I got the trunking portion. Like I said, these topics were pretty basic, and that's why they're the foundations. You have to make sure you have these foundations in concrete before you can build on top of them. If your foundations are weak, like you're building on a swamp, your house will fall. Whatever you build on it will eventually fall into the ground. But if you build on top of a strong concrete foundation, you can stand for a long time. So that's what I'm trying to establish here. Next section was VTP. I got the VTP section. So again, one of my revision numbers was off from the solution. I think that's okay. Everything else was on point, and I achieved all of the elements in the task, so I marked it as good. Spanning tree was also good. Now, if you remember, early on in the lab, I actually did not know how to solve this, and I was sort of fumbling around through the documentation trying to sort it out. The LAN tamer joined me on chat and on the Discord server and had recommended PortFast. He wasn't 100% sure, but that was his hunch. I went ahead and put it in and moved on, and that was just sort of, I was just guessing at that point. I had no idea if it was going to work, and I couldn't find documentation fast enough to verify. Turns out that was exactly the solution and on the correct interface. So I have that highlighted here because I actually want to go back and read the theory on why that actually works so I can understand it. But it was a task that was completed, luckily, because I wasn't expecting to get that. So I gave myself a check mark, and we got that one. The next section was WAN technologies. That was the PPPoE and PPPoE authentication. I got both of those wrong. I did not configure this section. I fumbled on it. I fumbled through documentation and configuration examples, and I just could not get it. So those are two big red X's. I'm definitely going to be reviewing this technology next for my targeted labs and targeted studies, my little micro labs. I'm going to be working PPPoE, and probably right out of the INE workbook. The next section was IPv4 EIGRP. I gave myself a check mark for that. I met all the requirements. And it's funny when you look at the solutions. I don't know if everyone does this, but they're giving you the running the configuration elements that you should have configured, and there could be some differences, like in the name of a route map or the name of a prefix list or something like that. But I think it's cool sometimes when you're going through a lab and you're configuring and you line up the solution with it, and it's like exactly what they wanted. It's a really good feeling. It kind of means you're right where you need to be. As long as you were sure of yourself when you configured it, you're right where you need to be. And so that happened with my EIGRP section. The EIGRP authentication, I also got. Again, it's pretty basic, pretty simple. I got it. The IPv4 EIGRP optimization, I got that also, although our timers were different. I would detect a failure in less than 5 seconds. And so that worked. The EBGP was good. I got all of that correctly. And remember, I had a problem with the autonomous system numbers in my documentation. Again, I told you this particular PDF I'm working from of the workbook is an old one. So when I compared this to the current solution they have on the website, these are fixed. So in the tasks, they're fixed. So again, the old one is a little misleading. And also there was a section on there for IBGP, and I gave myself a check mark for that. And if you were doing a side-by-side comparison, anyone else was grading my work except for me, you would have marked it as wrong. You would have said I configured BGP on the wrong switch. And here on my documentation, it's on my task list, it said configure BGP on switch 1. And so I did. However, the solution says configure BGP on switch 2. And so I went and looked at the new tasks on their at the INE workbook website, and that is fixed also. It says switch 2 on the task. So 2 things that I had to adjust myself here on the documentation. A BGP authentication, I got that. It didn't mention anything about clearing the BGP session, which I was warned about in some of my at the CCIE lab tutorial I took in Cisco Live. After you apply authentication, make sure you clear the BGP session, or it won't take, and you won't get credit for it. And then you'll lose points for the entire section, whatever section that is. So I was surprised I didn't see that in the solution. Okay, BGP aggregation. This one I was a little shaky on because I thought just the spread of the loopback addresses that you have to configure is so much so that you have to give it a /10, which is 64, which is 64 individual Class B subnets, and that's huge for like 4 hosts. I don't know. It's just my mind doing like the math on the wasted IP space, just driving me nuts. But anyhow, I got this 100% correct. It's one of those times where you line up your config against the solution and you're right on. And so I was really happy about that. And the BGP path selection, also I got that one correct. Now I know for seasoned CCIE professionals and people who are newly minted CCIEs and people who are long on their journey and have done these foundation labs many times over and on to much harder things. This was a pretty good accomplishment for me. It was sort of a validation that, hey, I do know these things and I'm ready to take the next step. So these things weren't particularly hard, so I'm not giving myself a pat on the back saying I've done something that was complex. Instead, I'm giving myself a pat on the back saying, like, you're ready to take the next step. You're ready to move on. And for most of these topics, I am. Except for that damn PPPoE. Ugh. Next section was DMVPN. I looked good there. EIGRP over DMVPN was also good. And then the IPsec over DMVPN. I gave myself credit, although if anyone else was grading my work, the whole section would have been trashed because I forgot one thing. There was a stipulation for the following IPsec profile encryption, AES 256-bit. And so I did simply AES and I left out the bit signifier. I just left it out. I wasn't thinking and I left it out. And I 100% missed it. 100% looked right over it and didn't configure it and missed it. So maybe I should go back and take credit off for that. But I was happy that I could at least recall from memory all of the commands needed to do the configuration for IPsec and apply to DMVPN. So I gave myself credit for that, although I'm going to have to pay more attention, closer attention to the specific requirements as far as encryption and hashing and transport mode and Diffie-Hellman and all the little configurable elements. I need to pay very close attention going forward. IPv6 routing was IPv6 EIGRP. I got that spot on. That was really easy. It was a couple of commands. You had to put them on all the damn routers, and you were good to go. And the IPv6 redistribution, again, that went swimmingly. I was very happy about that. So that's my scorecard. Although there's no points valued on any of this, that's my scorecard. So I don't know. I'm not even going to fake what a score would be. But I do know there are 2 technologies I need to go back and review as the result of completing this lab, which is PPPoE and Spanning Tree, DAM Spanning Tree, as well as paying a little closer attention to some of the details. But overall, I did really good. So I'm looking forward to doing the next round of Foundation Labs. There are 3 Foundation Labs, and I think this is awesome. This is really, really awesome. I'm really enjoying myself. Yeah, it's very cool. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for supporting me through YouTube and on the chat and on Twitter and on the Discord server. Thank you so much. Every time I could, I would look over at the chat or I would check social media briefly, and all I saw was positive feedback and words of encouragement. And really, that's what helped push me through. 7.5 hours was a long day. I was so happy to be done. I went outside. I went for a long walk. I almost ended up back at the house, and I just made another turn and took a longer path. It was such a nice day out this evening. I just wanted to get the sun on my skin and enjoy the weather. So with that said, we're wrapping up here. It was a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to the next Foundation Lab. I'm going to make sure it's ready ahead of time, okay? So I don't waste an hour or more during the lab. So if any of you want to get ready to lab with me, I'm going to be doing the INE CCIE Routing and Switching V5 Workbook Foundation Lab number 2. If you guys want to get your All Access Pass paid for or get your topologies built or however you want to go about it, that's what I'll be doing next time. And again, join me in the Discord server for chat. I'll try to get a little nicer setup for here at the house so I can do a dual monitor and be able to participate in chat at the same time. So thank you all. I think this wraps it up for me. I got to get to bed. It's nearly midnight and I got a big day again tomorrow. It is my cheat day, but I am working on a side project. So look forward for that. There's going to be some cool things coming up, some cool collaborative labs and things going on. So I won't say any more. I'll stay very hush-hush. And if I don't lab tomorrow, I'll see you guys Monday.